My wife planned to humiliate me at my retirement party. So I secretly recorded her, exposed her affair in court, and kept the ranch, truck, and every last dollar. 15 years is a long time to hold your breath. But that's what being married to Delilah felt like. Like I was always bracing for the next explosion. My name's Marshall Briggs. I'm 56 years old, born and raised outside of Llano, Texas. Been running cattle since I was 18, same land my granddad fenced in back before highways cut through hill country. I'm not a man who likes drama. I fix fences, haul hay, and treat my horses better than most people treat each other. But when I married Delilah, I invited a storm into my quiet life and learned to ride it out in silence. Delilah wasn't always like that. Or maybe she was, and I just didn't want to see it. She was fiery, wild, the kind of woman who could stop a room just by walking in. I thought that fire meant passion. It took me years to realize it also meant destruction. She had a temper like a summer thunderhead, rolling in out of nowhere, fierce, loud, and gone just as fast. I learned early on not to push her. Like the time I suggested switching vets. Our old one was retiring, and I thought Dr. Clements, a younger guy in Mason, might be a better fit for our quarter horses. Delilah didn't say anything at first, just nodded. Then she walked out to the stables, yanked a saddle off the rack, and hurled it straight at the tackroom wall. Left a dent in the wood that's still there. I remember standing outside, listening to the crash and thinking, what the hell just happened? But I didn't say a word. I just fixed the wall and called the old vet back. I had my ways of managing her. Gave in when it didn't seem worth the fight. Stayed quiet when her moods shifted like wind direction. Smiled when I didn't feel like smiling. Over time, I got good at predicting when a storm was coming. Little signs, like how she'd stir her coffee too fast or slam the cupboard doors a little harder than usual. I called it weather watching. It became part of my life, just like feeding the cattle and rotating pasture. There was this one time, maybe 5 years back, we were picking feed suppliers for the winter. I wanted to go with Dunbar's. Better pricing, consistent quality. But Delilah had met this fancy rep from a boutique supplier out near Austin who promised organic hay and some special mineral blend for coat shine. Triple the cost. I told her it was too expensive, that it didn't make sense for our budget. She didn't yell that time. Didn't throw anything. Just looked me dead in the eye and said, if you don't think I'm worth it, just say it. So I caved. That's how it always went. Me bending, her winning. I told myself it was just the cost of loving someone like her. That I could handle the weather if I got to keep the sunshine. I told myself I was strong for staying. That I was patient, loyal, loving. But in truth, I was scared. Scared of setting her off. Scared of losing her. Scared of being alone again. And over time, I stopped standing up for what I wanted. I shrank. Not in my boots or my shoulders, but in the quiet places of my life, where a man keeps his pride. Looking back now, I can see it plain as day. My marriage wasn't built on love. It was built on endurance. And for 15 long years, I endured. It was supposed to be our anniversary. 15 years together. I had it all planned out. A 4-day trail ride through the Smoky Mountains, just Delilah and me, camping under the stars. I'd spent months getting it right. Reserved the horses. Packed the good sleeping bags. Even found this old trail marker she'd once told me about. Said her mama used to take her there as a girl. But 2 nights before we were set to leave, I came home to find Delilah curled up on the couch, flipping through one of her glossy travel magazines. She was all smiles. Too many, actually. I should have known then. You ever heard of Yellowstone River Retreat? She asked without looking up. Can't say I have, I said, dropping my keys in the dish. I was already thinking about double-checking the saddlebags. It's in Montana. Upscale dude ranch. They've got luxury tents, catered meals, massage cabanas, real rustic chic. She turned the page and pointed at a photo of a couple clinking champagne glasses in a hot tub under the stars. I nodded, humoring her. Looks nice. Maybe someday. She snapped the magazine shut. Well, good news. I already booked it. I just stood there. What do you mean you booked it? For our anniversary. I canceled the Smoky Mountains trip. Figured this would be more us. More us? I nearly laughed. Delilah, we talked about this. I already made the arrangements. Paid deposits. She waved her hand like it was nothing. They'll refund you. They won't. Some of it's non-refundable. She tilted her head, all condescension. Why are you always so cheap about everything? That hit harder than I care to admit. We can't afford a trip like that right now, I said. You know we've been trying to pay down the line of credit. She rolled her eyes. You and your small-town money mind. God forbid we do something elegant for once. I tried to stand my ground. For once, I really tried. But she was already pulling out her phone, scrolling through her banking app. It's done, she said. I put it on the shared card. Just like that. Months of planning gone. I didn't even argue. Just nodded, like always, and helped her pack her monogrammed luggage 2 days later. The The Montana trip looked like something out of a magazine, but it didn't feel like us. Not to me. She spent most of the time at the spa. I spent most of the time walking the edge of the property, wondering how we got here. Every night, I lay next to her in that king-sized canvas tent, listening to the sound of her soft breathing and the hum of the electric heater, and I felt more alone than I ever had under an open sky. That was the first time it really hit me. She wasn't just growing apart from me. She was embarrassed by me, and I didn't know how to come back from that. The morning I signed the papers, I didn't feel much. No relief, no sadness. Just a quiet sort of finality, like turning out the lights in a barn you know you'll never walk into again. The ranch was sold. 58 acres of soil, sweat, and memories, gone. It was a fair deal, more than fair, really. Some developer out of Austin wanted the land for a high-end agritourism project. Boutique cabins, wine tastings, all the things folks from the city think they want when they come play cowboy for a weekend. Delilah acted like it was a victory. We're finally getting out of the mud, she said the day the check cleared. No more scraping manure off your boots. I didn't tell her I'd miss the mud, that I'd miss the mornings when the mist still clung to the pastures and the cattle were just shapes moving slow against the fog. I didn't say I'd miss hearing the wind move through the hayfield like it had something to whisper. Some things ain't worth saying when no one's listening. She took the reins on the retirement party, said it was her turn to do something fitting for our future. I figured she meant a barbecue with friends, maybe something out at the fairgrounds. Instead, she booked an upscale vineyard outside Fredericksburg. The kind of place with crystal chandeliers in the tasting room and a staff that spoke in soft voices and used words like mouth-feel and notes of blackberry. When I pushed back, just asked if maybe we should keep it simple, she looked at me like I'd stepped in something. Marshall, this is about honoring your work. Our life. Don't you think it deserves something elegant? Truth is, I didn't. But I wanted to believe she meant well, that this was her way of saying goodbye to the ranch too, even if she couldn't say it out loud. So I let her handle it. She invited everyone. Her parents, her brothers, all dressed like they were posing for a country club catalog. She even invited some of her college friends I'd only ever met once or twice, folks who wouldn't know a feed trough from a flower pot. I noticed my side of the list was mostly missing. My sister didn't come, said it was too far a drive. My cousin Hank had called to say he wasn't sure he'd fit in at a wine place. I told him I wasn't sure I would either. I worked on a speech. Not a fancy one, just something honest. I was going to talk about the ranch, about the early years when Delilah and I used to sit on the porch and dream about the future. I wanted to thank her for sticking by me, for building a life with me. Maybe I was lying to myself, but I believed, or hoped, that she'd appreciate the gesture. That under all the show and shine, she still remembered the mud and the work that came with it. I stood in front of the mirror that morning, practicing the words. I couldn't help but smile. For all the storms we'd weathered, maybe this was a new beginning. I had no idea what Delilah had planned instead. The vineyard looked like something off a postcard. Golden sunlight. Rows of grapevines trimmed neat like hedges in a rich man's backyard. Waitstaff in black aprons walked around carrying little plates with food I couldn't pronounce. I was uncomfortable from the minute we pulled in, but I kept telling myself, it's just one night. Smile through it. Get to the speech. Delilah was glowing. Not the kind of glow you get from love or pride. It was something sharper, like she was standing on a stage and soaking up applause no one else could hear. She wore a cream-colored dress that shimmered when she moved and heels that clicked like judgment against the tile floors. Our guests sipped sparkling wine and made small talk about vineyards and vacations and places they'd summered. My old ranch hand, Pete, showed up in his best flannel and looked like he'd wandered onto the wrong planet. I gave him a quick hug and thanked him for coming. Wouldn't miss it, he muttered, eyes darting around like he expected someone to throw him out. I kept checking my inside coat pocket. The note cards were there, creased, maybe a little damp from my hand, but still legible. I wanted to make sure I didn't forget the line about the sunrise over the barn and how it reminded me of the day Delilah said yes. Then someone tapped the microphone. It was Delilah. She stood at the front of the tasting room beside a tall, broad-shouldered man in a too-tight dress shirt with sleeves rolled up like he thought he was on the cover of a romance novel. Hi everyone, she said, grinning like a teenager. Thank you for coming to what you thought was Marshall's retirement party. Laughter rippled. Mine caught in my throat. She looked at the man beside her, Ronan. I'd later learn. This is Ronan, she said, placing her hand lightly on his chest. My personal trainer. And as of today, my partner. The room went quiet. Dead quiet. I'm leaving Marshall, she said, like she was announcing a drink special. Not just leaving, freeing myself. This isn't the end of a marriage. It's the beginning of my life. Someone gasped. I couldn't tell who. I just stood there, frozen. I hadn't even taken my seat yet. I've spent 15 years tied to a man who never wanted to grow, she continued, her voice smooth and cruel. I've lived in dirt and silence, surrounded by cows and fences and expectations. I'm done pretending I'm happy being someone's ranch wife. My jaw clenched, but I didn't speak. I wanted to, I really did, but I couldn't move. And yes, she added, flashing a smile that didn't reach her eyes, Ronan and I are planning a family. A real family. One with joy and movement and future. She looked right at me. And children. My stomach dropped. You see, she went on, some men aren't able to give that. Physically, emotionally, whatever. And I'm done waiting. I deserve more. I deserve better. The world stopped turning for a moment, because only a handful of people knew about my infertility diagnosis. And Delilah was one of them. I looked around the room. People stared at their wine glasses. Some looked at me with pity, others with confusion. Pete looked like he wanted to fight someone. I'm not sorry, she said, her final words like a slap. This is me choosing me. And I'm not hiding it. She stepped back, smiling beside Ronan, whose smug face made me want to put a fist through a wall. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I just stood there, gripping my note cards in a hand that suddenly didn't feel like mine. So much for my speech. So much for 15 years. The silence hung like humidity after Delilah's announcement. Thick. Sticky. Uncomfortable. No one moved, not at first. Even the waitstaff froze mid-step, eyes flicking toward me like they were watching a man bleed out on the vineyard floor. Delilah looked pleased with herself, smiling as if she'd just delivered a TED Talk instead of gutting her husband in front of 50 people. That's when her father stood up. Harold Wexler was a retired sheriff, the kind of man who carried respect in his posture and steel in his voice. He wore his old Stetson like it still meant something. When he rose, the air shifted. He didn't say a word at first, just walked slowly toward the front, his boots clicking against the floor, echoing in the tense silence. Delilah's grin faded when she saw him approach. Dad, she started. He held up a hand. Don't. Then he turned to face the crowd. I apologize for what y'all just witnessed, he said, voice steady, slow, and deliberate. This was supposed to be a celebration. What we got instead was shame. He turned to Delilah. You think that was bravery? He said, pointing at her. That wasn't courage. That was cruelty wrapped in a speech. Delilah's jaw tightened. I was just being honest. No, Harold cut her off. You were performing. For applause. You humiliated a good man in front of his friends and thought that made you powerful. The room held its breath. I raised you better than this, he said, shaking his head. But I guess I failed somewhere along the line. Delilah looked stunned. She glanced at Ronan, who stood there awkwardly, clearly wanting to disappear. Her mother stood next, slow but sure. We won't support this, she said simply. Not the affair. Not the way you did it. Not the woman you've become. Delilah's eyes darted across the room, searching for an ally. Her brothers, both of them, looked down at their feet. One of them, David, finally spoke. I brought my wife here to honor Marshall. You made a fool of him and us. Delilah's face cracked. You can't all be serious, she stammered. You're siding with him? Her father stepped closer. We're not siding with anyone. We're just not standing beside this. She turned to Ronan, eyes wild. Say something. But Ronan only raised his hands and said, I think maybe we should go. Delilah looked at him like he'd just slapped her. Go, she whispered. After all this? He reached for her arm. Delilah, please. Let's just get out of here. She jerked away. Don't touch me. Her voice echoed off the vineyard walls. The guests began murmuring. A few quietly slipped out the side doors, giving me long, apologetic looks on their way. I didn't move. I didn't speak. I just watched. The woman who'd planned a spectacle stood alone now, her support system crumbling in real time. Her father, her mother, her brothers, gone. And for the first time since I'd known her, Delilah looked afraid. The morning after the vineyard fiasco, the house felt quieter than it ever had. Too quiet. The kind of silence that presses against your ribs like it's trying to remind you, you've lost something. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the coffee I couldn't bring myself to drink. The chairs were still pushed back from where we'd sat the day before. Her perfume still hung faintly in the air. But she was gone. Her clothes. Her vanity clutter. Her voice. All gone. I reached into the drawer near the fridge, pulled out a small black voice recorder, and set it on the table. I bought it 3 years ago, back when the fights got frequent and something inside me started whispering, you need to protect yourself. I never intended to use it. Not at first. But over time, it became my safety net. Most days, I'd leave it running in my shirt pocket, especially during her rants, those long, looping monologues where she'd tear into me, into the ranch, into everything I'd built. I told myself I was keeping records just in case things ever turned legal. I didn't know I'd be playing them back to hold myself together. I clicked through the files. Most of them were just background noise, shuffling, wind, a cow mooing, maybe. But then I found the one I'd labeled with a star. Click. Her voice crackled to life. He's going to lose his mind, she laughed, glass clinking in the background. I swear, I'm going to say it on the mic, right in front of everyone. Drop the bomb and just walk out like a queen. Another voice, her friend, probably. Girl, you were cold. Delilah giggled. He thinks he's going to give some sweet little speech. But nah, I'm done letting him be the poor cowboy husband. I'm not letting him play the victim card. Not this time. I sat there, listening. Every word felt like a hammer blow to the chest. I forwarded it to my lawyer that same day. He called me back within the hour. Marshall, he said, you've got enough here to swing this cleanly. File immediately. No mediation. No contact. She made her bed. He drew up the papers by the next morning and put her attorney on notice. If Delilah tried to come after the property or the savings, we'd submit the audio. We'd bring in the guests. Witness statements. All of it. Her lawyer balked. Said it would be unnecessary escalation. But the tone shifted. They knew they were cornered. Later that week, I sat in my truck with the engine off and listened to the recording one last time. I reached the part where Delilah's voice turned mocking. You can't even have kids, she said. You should be grateful I stuck around this long. That line hit harder than the rest. Because she didn't say it to hurt me in the moment. She said it behind my back. Like it was some cheap punchline. I turned off the recorder and sat there a long time. And that's when something changed in me. I wasn't heartbroken anymore. I was awake. I'd spent 15 years trying to be enough for her. Now, finally, I realized she wasn't worth the trying. The first text came 2 days after her lawyer received the recording. Delilah, I didn't mean for it to go that far. Can we talk? I didn't answer. By the next morning, the tone had changed. Delilah, wow. So that's it. 15 years and you just shut down. Then came the third. Delilah, you coward. You were never man enough for me. I turned off notifications and gave everything to my lawyer. He told me not to respond, not even once. Silence is strength, Marshall, he said. Let her unravel on her own. And unravel she did. She started spinning a new version of the story, one where I had abandoned her emotionally for years, where I was controlling, cold, and cruel. I found out through mutual friends, and later, through a few social media posts she had quickly deleted. It didn't work. See, folks had been there at the vineyard. They saw the performance. They saw her gloating on stage, the smirk, the way she humiliated me in front of people who just came to say goodbye to some cattle and toast a life's work. People started talking. And not the way she expected. Whispers spread fast in small towns. Especially when Delilah had always painted herself as a picture-perfect ranch wife with a hint of class and a glass of rose. But now they saw the cracks. Now they remembered things, the snide remarks, the way she'd cut people down at church luncheons, the condescension dressed up as charm. And then came the blow she didn't see coming. She was let go from her job. She'd been writing for a regional lifestyle magazine. Home tours, vineyard reviews, fluff pieces. Ronan had worked their 2 fitness columns, mostly photos of himself pretending to be helpful. But the scandal from the party, the whispers about the affair, the public nature of it all, they didn't want the drama. One of her coworkers told a friend of mine it just wasn't the brand we're trying to promote. Ronan? He vanished. Deleted his social media. Packed up, apparently moved back to San Diego. One day he was in her stories. The next he was just gone. Delilah tried to contact me again. Switched to blocked numbers. Sent long, rambling voicemails. Some were apologetic. I made a mistake. Marshall. I let my pride ruin something real. Some were angry. You owe me. I gave you the best years of my life. One, in particular, ended with, you're not going to win. I'll make sure of it. I forwarded it all to my lawyer. We had everything. The audio. The witnesses. The threats. The cruel jokes about my infertility. It painted a picture no judge would ignore. But the real one wasn't in the court filings or the property settlements. It was in the silence that followed. Her world, once full of control and confidence, was collapsing. She was no longer the woman people admired at brunch. She was the woman who got dumped at a retirement party she planned herself. And me? I hadn't said a word. Because sometimes the most powerful thing a man can do is nothing at all. It was quiet by the Brazos. Not the kind of silence that follows destruction, like after a storm levels a barn, but the good kind. The kind that hums low in your bones. That reminds you there's still time, still space, still breath in your chest. I hadn't felt that kind of quiet in years. I'd rented a small cabin about a mile from the riverbank, tucked between mesquite and live oak. Nothing fancy. 1 bedroom, a screen porch, and a fireplace I didn't need but liked having anyway. I wasn't planning to stay forever. But I wasn't in a rush to leave either. The divorce was finalized a month earlier. The settlement was better than fair. Delilah walked away with nothing but what she'd brought in, and even that came with conditions. I kept the truck, the retirement savings, what was left of the sale from the ranch. The cabin was mine. The silence was mine. Delilah moved in with a cousin outside Waco. She hadn't found work. Her family still wasn't speaking to her. Ronan never resurfaced. It was like he'd evaporated, and maybe in some way, he had. She hadn't contacted me again. I assumed her lawyer finally convinced her to stop. One afternoon, I stood knee-deep in the water, casting a line out into the slow current. I hadn't caught anything all week. Didn't really care. Just being there, under the shade, listening to cicadas and the slow lap of the river, that was enough. Back at the cabin, I'd taken up journaling again. Nothing poetic. Just scraps of thought. Small entries about the day. I wrote about the fish that didn't bite. The dreams I had that I couldn't quite remember. The way it felt waking up without dread in my stomach. A few friends stopped by from time to time. Pete brought over beer and old stories. We sat on the porch and didn't talk much, which suited us both fine. My sister called now and then. Said she was proud of me. I believed her. One morning, I opened the mailbox and found a plain white envelope with Delilah's handwriting on it. No return address. I didn't open it. Just stared at it for a moment. Felt the weight of everything it might contain. Apologies, bitterness, pleas, explanations. Then I lit a fire in the pit out back and tossed the letter in. Watched it curl and blacken, the paper shrinking into itself until there was nothing left but ash and old stories. That night, I sat on the porch alone, listening to the river whisper through the trees. And for the first time in a long time, I felt whole. Not because I'd won, but because I'd let go.